like you to use while Katie and Bruce are speaking. If you have questions you'd like to put forward, please drop them in the Q&A box, and then we will pick those up either as and when they come in or at the end. You can also use the raise hand function if you'd really like to contribute. If you could do me a favour now and use the raise hand function, just so that I know you can all hear me okay and that you're all good. That is wonderful. Thank you very much. And you can lower your hand again. That's perfect. Just if you have anything you really want to raise, please do that. Or as I say, otherwise, please pop something in the live Q&A function. So I'm delighted today to be welcomed by Katie Nicholson, who actually is in lovely sunny Cyprus today. So she's very lucky. And Bruce Elliott, who I don't know if Bruce is down in the engine house today or if he's in his house, but we'll find out. He's on the Isle of Man anyway. And I am zooming in from the chamber offices at the Eagle Lab today. So as I say, really, really delighted to welcome Katie and Bruce. We originally set this event up as a sort of pitching and networking style event, and Katie was going to talk very much about you know, the best ways to network and to you know, get your profile out there and you know, do that sort of face-to-face connectivity. Of course, the pandemic hit, so what we've done is we've actually adapted this event slightly in terms of looking at how you can still gain investment, you can still grow your business, you can adapt your business even during pandemics. And Bruce has a great story to tell you of his successes during this time. And Katie can also give a really good insight and overview into the current climate in terms of how you can adapt and invest within your business. So I will stop talking and I will hand over to Katie to start with. Just before I hand over, I'd just like to say, depending on how you have your setup on Zoom, the best way to have yourself set up is to simply have Katie and Bruce both on your screens. That would be the best way to do it, because then you can see them both and they can pass between each other. So Katie, over to you.
Hopefully you can all hear me now. Hi everybody, thank you so much for joining us, and thanks to Bex for that introduction. In terms of myself, so my experience really is with Startup Grind and Founded, and previously I ran Bridge, the Isle of Man's angel network, for 3 years. So it's really great to be here. Obviously, you know, it's been a difficult time. COVID-19 has impacted on everyone's business, whether you're a startup or scale up or, you know, a big corporate, everyone's been impacted by it. So today, Bruce and I are really here to kind of, I can give you some tips on what I've seen through some of the companies that I've been working with, and also through some of the investors that I've been working with in the UK and also on Ireland. Bruce has got a really great story to tell, and from my point of view, I really want it to be interactive. So if you've got any questions, please do pop them in the Q&A box, and we'll take them as they come in, and we'll be happy to try and give as much and share as much information as we can. In terms of just a bit of background on Startup Grind, if anyone's interested, Startup Grind is a global, the world's largest community of global entrepreneurs. There's over 600 chapters in 125 countries. And so Alex Wilson, my chapter co-director, and myself decided to set an Isle of Man chapter up at the end of last year, really to give Isle of Man companies and entrepreneurs the opportunity to kind of connect into that global network and to really you know, leverage the community element of Startup Grind. What they've recently introduced is a membership program, which Bruce and Memory Lane Games have actually successfully become a part of. So we've actually got, I think now 5, if not 6 Isle of Man companies that have successfully become members of that program, and through our kind of connections on Ireland, they get a year free, which is really great. And there's only 70, I think, being accepted globally, and about 12 in the UK, and maybe 2 or 3 in Scotland. So it's really great to have such a strong, community from the Isle of Man being involved in that. So, Bruce, do you want to tell a bit about your story and what you've been experiencing during COVID-19, and how Memory Lane Games has kind of done so well in, raising funds during such a difficult time?
Thanks, Katie. I hope everyone can hear me. Yes?
Yeah.
Great. I'm Bruce Elliott, CEO of Memory Lane Games. We're a digital health startup here in the Isle of Man. We're building apps for the elderly. We take gamification, personalization, and a dash of AI to deliver the optimal gameplay by cognition levels. And that sounds a bit complicated. It started out a few years ago with my co-founder, Peter Quayle, and I in the Crosby pub, talking about our mums. And his mom's 91 with vascular dementia. My mom's 86 in Canada. And one of the things they had in common was reminiscing about old family photos. So we took that insight and turned memories, have created apps. They launched next week, the first one, and it's been quite a wild ride. And as Katie said, strangely, during lockdown, we raised more capital, we hired more staff, we've emerged stronger from pre-lockdown than today than we were before. We've received our first government grant, despite only founding the company in September 2019. And we've had a really warm welcome from the local media, the local investors. So we're really thrilled about what's going on. And I've got some stories we'll get into about how that long journey came to quite a rush during lockdown. But we feel really fortunate, and we've emerged much stronger post lockdown than before. So what some of the success factors that I see, and again, success is relative. We're just getting going. It's the start of our journey. But raising more capital during lockdown, a couple of things really helped us. One is we shifted our language from developing to launching. And as soon as we did that, investors really stepped up. They kind of were following what we were doing, and boom, that was a key one. And before that, to set it up, we had kind of forced our way into a couple of panels in digital health panels in the UK. One was an all-party parliamentary committee on longevity that I just connected with someone on LinkedIn and got in, and we made a couple of comments, got to speak, and got some visibility. And another one was on the back of that was a Digital Health Rewired pitch fest that we just sent in an application. It took probably an hour and a half for us to actually complete the application, but we were invited to London to speak at a conference. And a couple of those things just start to give you a little momentum. But really what happened for us, we're launching an app in September. That was our plan, personalized dementia therapy. You upload your own family photos and videos, and we help you turn those into games. You add questions, who's standing next to Uncle Jim at the family weddings. You tag voice recordings to a video or a photo that your grandmother can hear, and grandmother can also record a memory and share it back to you. You may hear things you've never heard before. And again, we have an in-house AI development team to optimize all of that. And that was our plan. But right at just at the beginning of lockdown, when the university students were returning, our CTO and partner is a 21-year-old AI mechatronic engineer. And he came back and said, you know what, we need to do something now to help the socially isolating seniors. And so we kind of put the other app on hold and rushed out an interim app, which again moved us into launch mode from development mode. It gave us huge visibility. It enabled us to work really closely with our charity partner. And again, partnerships are so key in this. Our partner is Hospice, whose CEO came out, Ann Mills, gave us a wonderful quote the other day, which said that they're They love the simplicity of our app designs and are absolutely delighted to be part of this potentially life-changing app. So those kind of things didn't cost us anything. Those kind of partnerships and visibility and messaging support, incredible. So you put all those kind of pieces together, and we're in digital health, which happens to be the only sector, as Katie will probably tell you, the only sector worldwide that is having an uptrend in investment in Q2 globally. So those are the combination of things that have put us in a good step. Still very early days for us, but we're really excited.
Bruce, just if I can ask you a question there, just from what I've seen, there's been quite a shift towards what's called impact investing. So obviously COVID-19 has had a big impact in the way people operate and in the way I think that a lot of us think about our lives, and you know, technology that can be there, technology for good and that kind of thing. And obviously, as you've mentioned, older people being isolated, and you know, that can be awful enough without the added kind of implications of having dementia as well, and not seeing those people that you're used to maybe seeing, and it's difficult for families and stuff. Have you seen, in terms of the conversations that you've been having with investors, did you see kind of a shift towards that kind of impact investing, you know, when COVID hit? Whereas before you might have been maybe attracting people that were interested in the technology and the actual app that you developed.
Definitely, but it worked two ways. One, we felt better about our product. You know, my team and I thinking that we are doing something good and something that's needed now, and it gave us a lot of momentum internally. And the investors we were talking to, I think everything clicked, right? So I think when I look at impact investors, I think they're just investors, but the impact piece moves you higher up the list. And I think that's what we saw, is that the amount of attention, and we found during lockdown that actually key investors had more time on their hands and were able to read longer documents and than perhaps they were before. So we took that approach, putting in more detail and more information in our pitches rather than just the quick highlights. But coming to I absolutely think you talk about product market fit. Well, I think the timing for us has been really interesting. It's been a crazy time for all of us, but we've accelerated through this.
So I think, go for it.
I just want to give just 5. I sat on the other side when I was at Boston Ventures looking at projects, and now I'm on the other side, and I just wanted to share a couple of really basic things that we made mistakes early on that we fixed, and I think maybe, and some of them are just blindingly obvious. Like, it doesn't cost anything to get a domain. So if you're still using a Gmail and, you know, at bruce@gmail.com and you're trying to raise money, it's just not going to happen. Instant credibility. So I think finding any domain, it really doesn't just finding and getting an email is really critical. I think that there's, don't run out of money. That sounds funny, but ask and plan your investment rounds and really your push while you still have some money in the bank. That helped us with the government grant, because the government wants to provide grants to those who are sustainable businesses and who will hire people. And so we met both those criteria because we had 100 grand in the bank, knowing that we had kind of a 9 months runway and ambitious plans, and we're hiring people already. But having some capital in the bank just gave investors a lot of confidence. I also think that for those who are starting out, there's a wireframing software that's free called Figma, and use it. And if you can't get your idea into 21 screens, then you got a problem. And we started at 40 screens, and we knew we had problems, and went through 2 or 3 iterations ourselves. And then once we finally got it down and nailed, then we could move and accelerate things. But it's a free process. Is really easy to learn. Our team at the Engine House would be happy to help anyone who wants to learn that kind of way of prototyping. But it works just so well. We designed everything in React Native, very flexible language. Not that many people on the island are familiar with it, but we think I mean, Facebook owns it or uses it. Airbnb uses it. It's absolutely massive. One code base across all platforms. Really good. AI, learn Python, TensorFlow for poets. What a great name for software. And our AI is fairly simple. A lot of people, it's like the old big data. We are predicting gameplay by cognition levels and using AI to do that. And I think that many apps can utilize AI if they think about it truly, not just bolting it on for the investment bump. And I guess the other thing that we've found is the old saying, if you're not embarrassed by the first app you ship, which you'll see next week from us, then you waited too long. And I think that's absolutely true. I think Katie's told me that before as well. You have to get the product out and get people trying it and seeing it and giving you feedback. So we've taken that jump. We could have waited a lot longer, but so what you'll see is good, but it's going to be great. And I guess the last point I will share is stay visible. Even during lockdown, even at home, we were on every Zoom conference. Virtual conferences are actually cheap. You pay £600 maybe to get in, but you get a speaking slot. You don't have any travel costs or anything else. We found it really efficient. We were doing one just about every week, volunteering to be in, talking about our area of expertise. And now the bigger conferences, based on those, I got an invite, it's for May next year, but to speak at a conference on gamification, digital health conference, 2,000 people in the audience are attending, talking about gamification of cognitive behavior therapy. And that's a long way from us sitting in the pub talking about this idea. But with our clinic, dementia clinicians that we have and our charity partners, we're really finding a sweet spot in that area. So we're really enjoying getting that. But my point is visibility. Find ways to raise your profile, win some awards, and then you start to share that with investors, and that momentum helps. And my last point, before I turn it back, is we talk about momentum with investors. It's become clear to me that warm investors, not someone who doesn't know anything about your industry or doesn't know anything about your product or anything about you, that's a hard sell. But someone who understands the industry or is invested in similar kind of things or similar stage companies, spend more time with them. And again, that's what we did. And we're 100% Isle of Man investor funded, family offices, now an Isle of Man government grant, and we plan to continue that for the next while. We're, excuse me, we have $100,000 to go in our seed equity round. We've got 2 slots of $50,000, and we've got quite a few meetings this week and next week already booked with investors. And as we launch, and the profile, we expect to close that out in the next month, and then we'll look at a pre-series A probably in February for a couple million if things go well. That's and at that point we'll probably be looking at VCs around the world who focus on digital health.
Thank you very much, Bruce. It's phenomenal to hear your story. I've just had a question come through from one of our participants. How did you know that it was the right time to approach investors? Is it a specific stage or is it based on financial need?
Well, we had been talking to investors for a year. I think we just had the momentum finally to seriously do it. And a year ago I had a Gmail, not a @memorylanegames.com email. So all of those things. But I think it's when you can see the momentum. And I also think, sadly, people want to see that you've built something before they write a big check. So that's why I suggest taking something like Figma. We had a product when we were still, pitching with PowerPoints, it was hard. When we started, we had a clickable demo in Figma, just wireframes. That's when things really started to change.
Thank you, Bruce. Another question for you, Bruce. Great app. The question is, in the world we live in, ideas are easily copied. So in relation to the future, how much time is being spent on future-proofing / updates to the app, etc.? It's all about IP, isn't it?
No, I don't think so. I think most apps can be copied. So you need to find a sustainable competitive advantage. Now that may not be patentable. It may not be pure IP. For us, we're building a really unique global distribution network, including volunteers and charities all over the world who will become our brand ambassadors. And then we're launching a very, very unique pay. So our first app is free and it'll go around the world and hopefully delight the elderly everywhere. And then we launch a paid app optimized with AI. So we think that we're also introducing clinical trials. And so hospice here in the Isle of Man is going to run observational studies, proof of concept trials for us later this year. And we're convinced that the clinical trial takes our app into a digital therapeutic, which is amazing. So our clinical trial will be to determine our efficacy of our apps to improve the lives of dementia patients and carers, which is something big data has never been able to do. So in our case, it's going to be the clinical trial backed with a really global, unique, low-cost customer acquisition model. That's going to be the what's special. But I think we have quiz games. You'll see them. Someone could copy them. But we're convinced that the simplicity is really, really hard to achieve. Global distribution at super low cost with our charity partners and our volunteers, and because of the sector we're in, and then our clinical trials. That's where we think our moat will be. And I haven't found something to patent yet in our process that I'm willing to share.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you. Possibly one for Katie here. What form of investment have you found most demanded by investors? Is it pure equity investment, or do you use convertible loans or other finance?
I don't know is that specific question about Bruce's experience?
Yeah, I think it possibly may be.
100% equity financing for us, except for grants, which are the best kind of capital because they're non-dilutive, and we'll continue to pursue grants because I think that's for our model can be very supportive on the research side. But be careful. We worked earlier with a couple of VCs who gave us term sheets, and when it came down to the very end, their preference and liquidity payouts. So they wanted 3 times liquidity. So the first you sell your company for 10 million, they get the first 3 times their investment out first, and then we all share it after that. But if you only sell the company for 3 times that, they get 100% of it, and we get nothing. So there were a couple of things that we really were cautious of. So in preference shares, all of those kind of things, be very, very cautious. We all shares are in the same class. We have no debt, all the same voting rights. We didn't do any of those crazy things like the Snapchat guys. I think it's you have to be fair with investors, but we want the investors to be fair with us too. I think it's reasonable. Everyone's going to push around about valuation. I can talk about that in a bit because I think that's a really tough challenge. I'm sure Katie's network has a challenge with it as well. But talking about capital structure and share preferences, just be really cautious.
I would just add on that. Oh, sorry. I would just say, just following up on that point, I think a lot of people might find it quite difficult to even get their head around that idea of the exit. You're just starting out, you're building, you've not, like you said, you're just about to launch, you're still using, an MVP and that kind of thing. So actually at such an early stage, be thinking about selling to some people, it might come, it might cause a bit of conflict in the mind because, from one part of you really want to show that you're giving this business your all and that you're fully into it and that you're actually there trying to raise funding and you're 110% committed. But I think one of the things I've learned over the years is that it is really important to think about that exit down the line because anyone that is investing in your company wants to know how they're ultimately going to get their money back. So you do kind of have to have one eye on how you plan to exit the company, or how you plan for your investors to be able to exit the company.
Yeah, that's really useful. Yeah, thank you, Katie. Katie, could you elaborate a little bit more about, obviously I'm conscious that we have on the call today lots of local startup businesses here, or especially ones that are possibly looking to grow, you know, and together with yourself as part of Startup Grind and Founded and Chamber, we, you know, we recognise there are issues around how people access funding and investment. Could you maybe elaborate a bit more about how people can go about that in the current climate, localised to the Isle of Man?
Yeah, sure. So from my experience, it is quite difficult on the Isle of Man. I'm not going to kind of lie about that. Bruce has obviously had some good success, and many others have, but I think the nature of the island, there's this kind of perception that there's a lot of money there, but it's not very easy to access potentially, compared to cities in the UK where you'll go to big events and there's people kind of openly mingling, saying they're an investor and that kind of thing. On the Isle of Man, I think a lot of people are very private, and so a lot of the time this is probably where networking would come in, and really just kind of getting yourself out there, getting to events. Don't, obviously when you're working so hard, it's very difficult to prioritize the events that you go to, and you obviously, I found that it's very easy to fill your diary with event after event, but you need to try and find the ones that are going to bring the most value to you, and you know, just start from there, build a network, have those conversations. And then also obviously Richard's, I think, is on the call from Man Invest, so if you're at that kind of more progressed stage, I think their kind of sweet spot is around the 200k upwards. So depending on where you're at, obviously that's not probably suitable for the very, very small people that are just getting off the ground, but start with the DFE, as Bruce has mentioned. He's successfully had grants from there. I know they can take a while to come through sometimes, but be persistent and don't be afraid to follow up and bang on that door. In terms of kind of more locally, so Founded, we're actually setting up a new angel network. We've just kind of had that go ahead about a couple of weeks ago. So we will be looking to kind of regroup a lot of the investors that I was working with previously, and to bring in some off-island investment contacts as well. So once we have more information on that, I'll happily share it with people, because we'll be looking for, you know, early stage founders that want to invest and pitch and get their opportunities out there. I think it's also important to kind of do some education really with a lot of the professional, you know, there's a lot of professionals on the island that have some capacity to invest, especially in those early stage startups. In the UK, there's a really successful club called the 5K Club, and that is, you know, a number of professionals putting in 5K, which it doesn't sound like a lot, but if you're a very early stage startup, that could be, you know, fantastic for you. Plus you would get the benefit of having the insight. You know, if you get an investor that's an accountant or a lawyer, they can really help you. You know, they're some of the main things that startups need, that advice, and it's often very expensive to pay for it up front. And it's very difficult to justify that, and people kind of scrabble around using free resources. But again, I would say it's really important to take the right advice early stage, because I think that if you've got a solid foundation when you're establishing, it will really help you and stop you kind of getting tripped up in the long run. Don't know if anyone wants any more specific info on any of that. Maybe Bruce can talk about how he, you know, the grant process with the DFE. I'm aware, I can see who's on the call, so I know that a lot of you may have already done the micro business course. I think that's kind of the entry level that DFE go with, and then they go from there with the FAS grant. But I also know that Startup Manufacturing did an ecosystem review for the Isle of Man at the end of last year, and I know I'm pushing hard for that to kind of an action plan to come out of that, and for us to see some of those changes and see some of the points that were, you know, that came through that to actually be implemented and to help, you know, early stage founders and the ecosystem grow.
Katie, on that, I think one of the outcomes of that panel, I was at that, was looking at an EIS, SCIS-like model for the Isle of Man, where angel investors get to write off a chunk of their investment against their taxes right away. And it has held us back from fundraising in the UK, because we get right down to the final wire and the investor says, okay, great. Are you EIS qualified? No, we're from the Isle of Man. And they just go, oh, well, I mean, I get 50% of my investment back for day one, you know. Now, it's not perfect for that model, but and there are ways for Isle of Man companies to set up branch offices in the UK and participate in UK grants and other things in EIS. But I think the Isle of Man could really use something like a local EIS, SCIS type model for Isle of Man angel investors. I think just a couple of other observations that we had. Everybody's going to, the investors that we had the best receptions with were ones where we met for coffee to share what we were doing, not ask for money. And I think you need to time it. You're not going to get that on the very first ever, I think, on the very first meeting. It probably takes 4 or 5 meetings. I think you need to do that. And during those 4 or 5 meetings, and I think that's where you kind of line up who you're doing, who you've met, who's on your list. And then when you start to get momentum, that's when you can get in and engage with more investors. And I don't know how many people here saw that Zurich International ran a global innovation championship. Well, we did. We saw it. We entered, and we didn't win. But we made great relationships, and we're actually talking to Zurich about a couple of other things now, and they've been super supportive, and you'll see them helping us with our launch next week. So just keeping that visibility, keeping that momentum, and then when it's the right time, asking the investors for the right amount of money is a great way to go.
There's just a question that's come in. I've just seen. I've heard horror stories about entrepreneurs losing control of their companies to investors. How do you avoid this and remain in control? Bruce, you can give your opinion, but I think my advice on that would be going back to what I just mentioned about making sure you get the right advice at the very start. So when you're putting contracts in place, shareholder agreements, all that kind of stuff, really try and get some solid advice. You know, if you can network your way and find a lawyer or you know someone, just ask them. Don't be afraid to ask if they could give you some help. If not, there's so many local people on Ireland experiencing this that can help you there. And I think also just try and build. I know when you're looking for funding, it can be so stressful that you can just think, yes, this person's interested, I'm going to go with it, and then I can crack on with actually getting the business off the ground. But I think it's really important to try and get to know the person, build a relationship, understand if you've got the same values, and actually if you're going to be able, it's great to have sometimes a bit of a contrast because people bring a different experience to the table, and I think sometimes that can be really valuable. But I think ultimately you need to have that shared vision, have those same values, so that you're not going to start clashing down the line.
I think you want your investors are going to be partners with you. They're going to be talking to you every month, and you want that to be a positive relationship. So if it's really hard going in, it's probably can be even worse down the road. So just think about it, and also read the contracts. We had one term sheet that came to us. It sounded too good to be true. They take 50% of the company and they pay for everything. They provide the development, they provide developers, project management staff, team of 20, everything. We just bring our idea, our network, and our contacts. And that sounded fabulous. And then we got, because at the time it seemed like a great idea to scale quickly. But when we read the final contract, they had 80% voting rights, 50% equity, but 80% voting rights. So instantly, And then there were a whole bunch of fees they were going to assign to us that they owned the IP, not the company, but they did. There were a whole bunch of really small things in the contract that we ripped it up and said, thank you very much. But so just be careful. I think the other thing to not lose control is you have to raise money when you're in a reasonable position. So so that's why I think build a wireframe of your app, clickable. Most businesses have some kind of an application to it. So build that really cheaply and show people so that you're not just a piece of paper. Because if you're just a piece of paper, the investor has significantly more weight. And but as you start to build it, and just for quick valuation metrics, no one has a good guide of what your business is worth, and everyone says it's just worth what the investor will pay, but even they need some guidelines. And here's my rough rule of thumb: is you figure out how much money do you need to get to a major fundable milestone. The next major fundable milestone might be a live product, it might be customers, it might be revenue, whatever that is, and how much that will take you to get there. Give up 25% of the company for that. So, and then you work backwards of what your company valuation is. That's what we did. And I've seen lots of other models. Katie, I mean, Startup Grind has probably got 20 different models of how to set the valuation of the company. But yeah, I think that's how we did it. And investors, with the momentum we had, have accepted that.
Thank you both. Richard from Man Investors on the line, and he just mentioned that, Katie, you said about the 200K sweet spot. They said they are getting a lot of requests for investments from 50K. So we'll pop we'll pop Richard's details in the chat in a minute if anybody wants to talk to Richard.
I've just put Richard at maninvest.com. I think that's it, but you might want to correct me if it's wrong.
And I can confirm that Richard introduced an investor to us who wrote a check. Thank you. They did what they said they would do.
One thing I want to touch on while I've got everybody here is that during lockdown, Chamber launched the Business Advisory Service. It was something that we were planning to launch anyway as a knowledge sharing tool for the business community. What we did is we mobilised it a little bit quicker when we went into lockdown, because we recognised that there'd be a lot of businesses out there that needed some support from and some advice generally. So we have 60 mentors on there. I think, Bruce, you're one of our mentors, and Katie. Sure you are. I hope you are. If you're not, you need to be. You know, Jess is on the call. She'll give you the better stats. But we've helped over 100 businesses during lockdown, just in terms of questions and advice. You know, we've got mentors who sit in legal, digital marketing, accountants, tax advice, all of those sorts of things. During lockdown, a lot of people just had odd questions, just one-off questions like, I don't know what to do here, I don't know what to do here. We all equally had, sadly, businesses that would say, look, I need to liquidate and I don't know how to do it. But actually, we managed to turn that around through the mentor who advised them out of that decision and said, actually, you don't need to liquidize. This is what you need to do to get yourself through this stage. So just so you're aware, Jess, if you're on the call, can you put the Baz link in the chat, please? But that service is there, it's still there, and it will maintain going forward as well. But these are the sorts of tools that we need on the island. It's about creating that community of support between the Chamber of Commerce, Startup Grind, of Founded, and the Eagle Lab, and people like Bruce and all the mentors that we have. It's about, you know, sharing that knowledge and advice and helping each other to grow and thrive on the island.
Well, in the early days for us, groups like Bridge were really helpful. And not just introductions and events, but actually just counsel and looking at what we were doing. I did absolutely fantastic. We need more organizations like that. We need more crowdfunding, proper crowdfunding organizations here in the Isle of Man, and I hope that's coming. And it's frankly, it's embarrassing that we don't have that in a more formalized way. So, and that's.
If anyone would like to lobby the FSA on that, go for it.
Yeah, I think there's quite a ground force that's mobilizing to do that. And I'm hearing not only on the EIS, SEIS, but on proper crowdfunding. I mean, I think the legislation in crowdfunding says you can invest, like, or you can raise £1,000. I mean, it's like, yes, we approved that legislation, but no, you didn't. But those things will improve, I hope.
Question here for Bruce. One for you, Bruce. Have you had business failures, and what have those experiences taught you? Surely you've had no business failures, Bruce.
I started at NetTeller, an online payments company here that was, I started when I was the 70th employee. I left when there were 750 employees. Went from a small startup in Calgary, Canada to the largest company on the AIM exchange for a little while. And then legislation changed in the US, and we lost 75% of our market cap overnight. So I have seen some challenges. I can guarantee it. I think resilience and just perseverance. A lot of people told me memory lane games was a terrible idea. I can't tell you how many people told me that. And just look me in the eye. Honestly, Bruce, are you kidding me? This idea you dreamed up in the Crosby pub? That's a terrible idea. But we stuck to it, and our perseverance attracted really smart people, artificial intelligence expert, dementia clinicians, really smart financial analysts, and we just took all that on board. So I think in North America, it seems that failure in startups is a badge of honor. I'm not convinced that's true unless you learn something, and I certainly have learned that the power of external advisors, volunteers for free, are really willing to help you if you ask and are really respectful of their time. And it's really important part of the process.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And going back to what Bex has said about the business advisory service and also just Isle of Man in general, I think the main message I would have on that is that community is king, and really everyone wants, most people want other people to succeed. I'd like to say that everyone wants them to, and I think that because the Isle of Man has such a strong community spirit, and we saw that during COVID. I think Jess is on the call from a Fundy as well. Companies like a Fundy developing something that can help other startups and businesses, in the hospitality sector on the island. That is kind of what it's all about, that kind of story, and just support each other. Don't be afraid to reach out and ask for help, and ask someone. A lot of people have been posting on LinkedIn saying they've got experience in certain areas. If people are struggling, to contact them. Just don't. It can be daunting, and I find it hard. I've been networking for years, and I find it hard to ask people for help. But just really get out of that comfort zone, because you never know where it's going to lead.
I think to just further that, be visible, get out of the house, especially now that we can. So I work out of the Engine House in Castletown, a co-working space, and there's probably 20 startups out of the building, and on any given day there's probably 10 of them there, people at different tables and things. We started with one person at one table, and now we're 2 tables with the 6 and 7 of us, but we're visible, and we help the other people in the building. They help us. It's amazing how much collaboration happens in co-working facilities. There's the Hub, the Eagle Lab. I think the Engine House has been incredibly supportive to us, and for some strange reason, almost all of our best ideas have happened in that building when we drive past the ferry bridge heading down to Castletown. So I highly recommend the co-working experience. You get out, you can run your ideas by someone at the coffee machine, and again, that's just that community. Yeah,
I couldn't agree more with both of you from a chamber perspective. growing that community and that level of support, collaboration is absolutely key. We see it all the time happening at Chamber over the years, where groups of businesses who actually in other parts of the world, you know, they're competitors, and other parts of the world probably wouldn't have sat in the same room together, but what they've recognised is that actually on the island, working together and collaborating gets you further than fighting against each other, and it's absolutely key. And the Isle of Man is a great place to network and collaborate. I think you can get on quicker and easier here doing that than anything else, and we are very lucky that we can do that. Just conscious of time, got 10 minutes.
There's just a question back in the chat.
Yeah.
Jess has just posted. Just top tips for confidence and building resilience. I'm very creative and techie, but lack public speaking ability. Question just in from Instagram. I would say, from my point of view, I mean, I'm definitely a people person. I thrive off interacting with people, but I think that I still get nervous. It's really natural for anyone, especially those people who aren't or more introverted and maybe not as experienced. I think you just have to really, it is experience. I spent 10 years kind of going to events, being that person in the room as soon as I walked in, trying to find someone that I knew and latching onto them. So it is a process. I think that you get better at it the more you do. When I get up and talk, I still get a shaky leg and a wobbly voice a lot of the time, and I think it's how you channel that. There's loads of good resources online about that, and I'm sure you know, there's people within the Chamber community that can help with that kind of stuff that are maybe more experienced than I am. But I think that just really put yourself out there. Maybe if you're looking to go to an event and you find it difficult, if you know someone else that's going, just drop them a line and say, do you mind if I come with you? And just kind of attack it that way, I would say. But it will feel good afterwards, and then just kind of go through those motions.
My suggestion is do Zoom calls with the video off, and do them with 10 people a week, friends, family, whatever, and just keep practicing Zoom calls. I do most of my pitches over Zoom. I'm comfortable in that kind of thing, but I think you just need practice to do it. And the other thing is, might sound funny, but you got to believe in what the product that you're doing. If you're pitching something you don't really believe in, you know, you shouldn't be pitching. So if you're really excited about it, if really excited and believe in it, then that's when you should be pitching stuff.
Yeah, I saw quite a good quote yesterday from someone that was saying that in the online world, you actually need to be more prepared, and you actually need to really build that trust. But once you build that trust with the people that you're pitching to or speaking to, then you start to trigger that feeling, and it's all about kind of getting to that point of, you know, really believing in your idea and getting across what is the need for it and why, and don't bombard with too much information. Just give them what will stick in their minds, and you can always follow it up later on email. Another
idea is many VCs won't invest in single founder companies. They want someone who've brought on a partner. And I think our technical partner is 21. He's awesome. He created, I think yesterday, presented something to us, a piece of code that will give us sustainable competitive advantage, and something we didn't even ask for. He just went ahead and thought about it and did it. So finding that right complementary partner, so there's two of you pitching, I think that can really help build the credibility and the confidence, especially if they're in different areas. And I think one of the most important things you can, my suggestion right now is hire returning university students. They have no job prospects, nothing. And they're hungry, they're awesome, talented. We've hired 2 computer science grads, history grad as well. And we're looking for more. And reasonably priced, really hardworking. They like a flexible work day. That's fine because they'll work till midnight. But wow, I mean, my co-founder Peter and I, you know, it took us adding a 20-year-old at the time, 19-year-old, I think maybe when he started, to really bring the technical chops to our business.
I think that also kind of just resonates with the fact of having a diverse team. So, you know, actually have people around the table with different views to yourself or different skills, so that they can actually help solve problems in a potentially from a different viewpoint, or bring a kind of insight that you may not have thought of as well. There's a question, how do I bounce back from rejection? I would say resilience is, so one of my favorite people is Sheryl Sandberg, who is the COO of Facebook, and she's got a book called Option B, and that I'd really recommend that. It's all about when option A doesn't work out and you have to take option B, but a lot of it is really about resilience, building resilience. And what she says is you're not born with an infinite amount of resilience, or finite amount of resilience. It's like a muscle that you strengthen and build. So you basically have to put yourself in difficult situations, put yourself in positions where you're potentially going to fail fast, and take that experience and move on. There's nothing wrong with failure. Some of the best, so General Magic, another awesome movie which I'd recommend, which was actually produced by Sarah Karouche, who's a local Manx lady. I would watch that video. So that's all about a product technology that was founded, the predecessor to the iPhone essentially, and all the founding team of that, which essentially it was a failure, but they all went on to work at eBay, Facebook, all the big tech companies that we all use and hear of now. They all run those companies, and some of them founded them, and they would not have got to that point without having those failures. So it is difficult. Maybe find a mentor that you can actually, you know, have conversation with when you experience those difficult times, and someone that can help you see it clearly. But I think I would say don't take things too personally. Just take things at face value and move on.
I think I've had 100 investors say no to memory lane games. It wasn't that we weren't at the right stage, they weren't at the right stage, global economic crisis, a bunch of things happened, but 5 said yes. So, and I think I didn't take those as rejection. It just wasn't a good fit. And I know that sounds corny, but it was true. It was, we just weren't the right fit at the time. We were too early in raising, or we weren't prepared, or whatever it was. But we learned from them and got better, and now we're getting traction. But yeah, I think it's corny, but I think that we had 5% success rate in pitching investors.
Well, I think the stat in the UK is that 1% of companies that pitch for investment actually get the investment. So don't be too hard on yourself.
This is where it comes into play, that if you believe in your product and you're passionate about it, you'll keep going. You know, rejection after rejection, you say, I know this is right. This is you know, this is good. And that must be what gives you that drive to keep going and not to give up.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, if Rebecca, if you want to share my email in the chat, I'm happy to anyone to send me a note, and we can meet at the Engine House one day. And myself, Eric Evenson, who runs the place, is an angel investor, and happy to sit down and just chat.
Thank you, Bruce. That's really kind. I'm just conscious of time. Have either of you got anything else you'd just like to cover before we finish, or if anyone has any final questions they'd like to add before we close?
I think visibility is critical. So we entered the Zurich startup competition. It was free. We entered a couple of virtual conferences as attendees and commented during the panels, and then got invited back to speak on different things. I think right now that is absolutely key. And you learn so much, you make some contacts, and you can drop those things into conversations. We were finalists at the Digital Health Rewired Pitch Fest. It's because we spent a couple hours filling out a form. I think those are the kind of things you have to do at this point. You need some momentum, you need some good contacts, but a lot of that comes from just grinding. I mean, I'm on LinkedIn connecting with people every single day.
Yeah, thank you, Bruce. Oh, hi, here I am. I've been hiding in the background. Thank you very much, Bruce. And thank you, Katie, as well. That has been really, really helpful, really interesting. And we've had some great questions as well. And I hope that everybody on the call has found that useful. I have recorded this, so I can upload it onto the Chamber YouTube channel for people to rewatch or share if they'd like, with permission of Bruce and Katie, if they're okay with that. Thank you all very much for your time, and enjoy.
Can I give one final thought?
Yeah, of course.
If you're pitching with a Gmail email address, you're not ready.
Yeah, completely agree. Yeah, absolutely. Good place to start, isn't it? Get your email address sorted. Absolutely. Thank you both very much. Enjoy sunny Cyprus, Katie, and thank you both very much for your time.
Thanks, everyone.